Successful individuals use coaching and mentorship to help them unlock their potential. Not all coaches are created equal, and that's why we work with the top 5% of coaches at IdeaMix. Welcome to Coaches You Need, brought to you by IdeaMix.
Today we're in conversation with Professor Modupe Akinola. She's a professor at Columbia Business School whose research has focused on stress, diversity, and biases in the workplace. She's written extensively on these topics in publications like the New York Times, NPR, Wired, among others. Her co-authored Sunday New York Times op-ed titled Professors Are Prejudiced Too with Dolly Chu and Catherine Milkman was one of the top 20 most emailed, read, tweeted, shared articles the weekend it was published. She consults for various organizations, among which are police departments across the US advising on their reform efforts. And apart from her extensive academic qualifications, she's worked in consulting, finance, and in the nonprofit world along her path to where she is now, one of the most highly rated professors at Columbia Business School. We'll try not to hold that against her, despite being a Harvard University and a Harvard Business School grad, that she's chosen to teach at Columbia. Modupe, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really good to be here.
So Modupe, with your background in psychology, your research sits at the intersection of organizational efficiency and change, psychology, and human behavior. You've done so many different things leading up to becoming a professor at Columbia Business School. Is this where you thought you'd end up, even as you were working at Bain Consulting or on a nonprofit project in Ghana?
Here's the funny thing. I was a psychology major undergrad, and I took a course on the psychology of organizations, and I even took my GRE junior year in college thinking that I wanted to be a professor.
Okay.
The amazing thing for me on my journey was I also did business stuff on campus, like Harvard student agencies, all that. And I had a mentor who was a business school professor who, when I said, I think I want to be a business school professor, was like, no, do the business stuff, do that, you know?
Right.
So I was kind of like, you're right. Maybe I will try a different path because I love the business side of things too. And at that point, I was like, I'll get my PhD when I'm in my 50s or 60s. Eventually, I ended up getting my PhD sooner than that, and that led me on this path. But there's nothing like getting guidance from mentors, having mentors, getting guidance from them in terms of shaping your path. But, you know, there's certain things that you do prior, whether it's in college, whether it's in your extracurriculars, that light you up. Yeah. Pay attention to those, because that might be something you do later or sooner than you think.
Yeah, it's fascinating, I think, that, you know, we go through our high school, college, grad school, you know, early working years, sort of not cognizant of that in a way.
Yeah.
And sometime towards the end of the 20s, early 30s, there's this sort of realization of, gosh, I really loved doing that thing or that set of things.
Yes.
And listening to those instincts, I think, is so critical to then sort of the future.
I think that's so right. And also having friends who give you guidance and advice too, because they've watched you in the things that give you joy. And it's funny because I know we were talking about a friend we have in common from business school. I remember the year that I was applying to business school to get my PhD.
Right.
I happened to touch base with her, and she was like, I had a dream the other day that you were a professor.
Huh.
So you never know what little things are happening in the universe to guide you along your path. So it's like, pay attention, pay attention.
Totally. Look out for the signs.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So part of your research has focused on how setbacks can often spur us forward. Yeah. I want to take a quick look at this video where you describe some of your research. Modupe, tell us a little bit about how you developed this study. What got you interested in the topic? How you designed the study?
Yeah. So there was a lot of research out there that was like, you know, it's bad to be in a bad mood in terms of being creative.
Right.
You know, you need to be in a good mood and a positive mood and all that. And I can think of a lot of times in my journey where I wasn't in a positive mood, but some creative things came out.
Yeah.
And so we kind of set out to better understand what is this link between mood and creativity. And we know from the video that lots of creative people often suffered from negative mood-related disorders, but then we're very creative. So what is it? And so in this work, the idea was to kind of unpack that and to look at your biology, which when coupled with situations can then affect your creativity.
Yeah.
And the big thing we found was that, when you have a negative mood triggering situation and you might be more sensitive to that, that's when people created the most amazing collages. So it's just a reminder that sometimes that negative mood, creativity offers an opportunity to repair that.
Right.
And so when I think about that in everyday life, one question is, when you're feeling down or whatever, what is something that you can channel that negativity into that can lead to some kind of creative output that might be useful for whatever it is you're struggling with? Yeah. So that was one of the origin of that work and what I take from it.
Yeah. No, it's, I think we live in a world where it's sort of a little bit the age of instant gratification, right? So it's sort of, I'm not in a good mood, or I'm feeling negative, or I'm feeling anxious, or whatever. And that's not a good thing, right? Is sort of the very common perception. Right. When the reality is, like, everyone goes through those cycles, and the question is really what you do with that, right? And can you channel it productively to kind of learn from those experiences and then get to a better place?
Absolutely. I like to remind myself and others, we were given this range of emotions for a reason. We have been given anxiety, so it's not that we're supposed to suppress it, you're supposed to experience it. And then ask yourself, okay, well, why am I feeling this way now? Why do these situations cause me to feel this way? And what can I do about it? Instead of just being like, go away. Oh, why am I anxious? This is bad. No, recognize it and accept it and then do something with it. And I hope that we start teaching kids this at younger ages, because I think that might lead to more healthy behaviors.
Totally. No, absolutely. I think I start to think about Lisa D'Amour's work, which you've, I'm sure, seen, and I remember when my girls were starting to, kind of experience some of those anxieties, that going to a talk by her, reading her book, it was sort of help your child as a parent to understand what they're feeling and going through, rather than saying, oh, don't be anxious, or oh, don't be stressed. Because these are all practical realities of our lives.
Exactly. And when we deny these things and these experiences, then it sends the signal that it's bad when it's not. So I think taking that advice for ourselves and for the young people in our lives is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the practical implications of how individuals translate your research findings into specific behaviors in a corporate context or any kind of business context, how do you think, any of us as individuals leading teams or in any kind of leadership role should sort of balance the positive and negative feedback we give people?
Yeah. It's such an important question. I think the first thing is understand your people. Know that certain people react in certain ways to types of feedback. So there might be somebody who's like, stop sugarcoating and telling me all the positive things first. Let's get to the negative, then get to the positive. Other people are like, please give me that positive reinforcement first, because then that will help me receive the negative, because I'm already thinking about the negative. So to the extent that we get to learn what each person needs and cater our feedback to that, or the processes we engage in, then that will be better for them. And I don't think that people have that sensitivity as leaders. And if you develop that, I think not only will it help people receive what you have to say, that then will lead to them progressing, staying, being motivated by you, and doing even better at their job.
100%. I mean, we experience this in our business here at IdeaMix all the time, right? Like, the skills that put people into leadership roles are then not the skills that they require to be effective leaders. And probably the number one skill is sort of evolving their communication style.
Right.
You know, kind of knowing your audience, as you
Right.
were just saying, understanding that different personalities require a different mode of communication.
Right.
And that transition, a lot of people struggle to make, right? And need sort of something, whether
Right.
it's, you know, some kind of learning mechanism, whether that's mentorship, in our case it's coaching, to really understand how to change those behaviors in themselves and then implement them with their team.
Right. And I mean, a couple of things that I always remind my students when I teach about being effective leaders is different people need different things at different times.
Yeah.
And also that we have these egocentric tendencies where we think that everyone's just like I am.
Right.
So the way I want to receive feedback is the way they no, or that they're just like each other.
Yeah.
No. And so to the extent that we remember that this is not the case, the better off we'll be.
100%. 100%. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about failure, another topic you've spent a lot of your time working with. One of the insights from some of your work is that failure is a positive practice, right, for life. And you chair the board of your alma mater, the Brearley School, one of the best girls' schools in the country that my girls have been privileged to attend. And even there, despite a constant effort, I think, at the school to talk openly about the importance of failure, admitting failure, discussing it, and learning from it, it often feels quite monumental for today's young adults, right? Share your thoughts with us on this. Is there something that's changed? Is what's shifted?
Well, I think that the problem or the challenge is that we as older adults are not used to that, used to understanding that. And so part of it is that we're passing that along, but then asking them to shift.
Right.
So how can we get used to this ourselves as adults? And the funny story about this, I just was with classmates of mine from Brearley.
Yeah.
And one of them has a child that goes to Brearley. And she mentioned that she was going to a birthday party and her daughter had written a card to the young person. And she'd messed up a word and crossed it out. And my friend was horrified, like, you're gonna give that card with the crossed out letters to your and she had to pause and be like, no, that's okay.
Totally.
Mistakes are okay.
Yeah.
And I bet you there are enough parents who are not pausing and they're being like, no, here's a new card.
Right.
Write the new one.
Yeah.
So I think that the beauty of interacting with other humans at different age levels is to be a mirror and to watch yourself and to say, wait, why did that trigger me? And what does that mean I need to change in myself to potentially not be triggered by that? If we do that more, then I think the younger generations are going to be even more accepting of this idea of failure and okay with it, knowing that it's just a part of life.
You're so right. I mean, I think these behaviors with children and young adults in particular are all learned behaviors and learned reactions, right? That come from, I mean, their teachers, their parents, who are the adults they interact with the most in their lives. And if we're just simply not role modeling the right kind of behaviors, then it's unsurprising that they become very anxious about failure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And admitting and sharing, like, here's where I messed something up too. I think we hold it in so much, and then that prevents the learning that can happen that then leads to changed behaviors.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. So, Modupe, one of the things we've touched upon in various ways in our conversation up until this point is learning, mentorship, coaching. Yeah. What role has that played in your life?
I feel like I'm a constant learner. I like to constantly be in that mode, that mindset. I like to constantly be in that mode and mindset of being coachable.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of coaching. Obviously, I have, my students, the clients I work with and all that. Yeah. But so much of the coaching that I do teaches me about myself too. And so I think the best coaches are able to kind of integrate in a unique way and not just impose their perspectives, but also listen.
Yeah.
I think the best thing we need to do as coaches and in being coached is to listen.
100%, yeah. And to treat it as a learning process for ourselves,
right,
as much as it is for the other person,
right,
as we kind of take them on this journey,
yeah,
of self-discovery.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are thwarting that process for them. Because often, as a coach, you kind of know, or you feel like you know the answer.
Right.
And so to have somebody walk through it themselves,
yeah,
and get to that place is even more rewarding for them,
yes,
as well as for you. But it's hard,
yeah,
because we like to impose our perspectives on others.
Well, and we also, there's almost a societal value system around tell me what to do, right, or tell somebody what to do,
yeah,
and that's viewed as, in some sense, a solution, right? Like the sort of quick fix or the free lunch or whatever. But there isn't one, really, right? Because you hear and are told all sorts of things kind of every day of our lives, but we don't internalize them until we do them, in a way.
Yeah. You just made me think about something that I am practicing more of, which is to ask people what they want. When they ask me for, what do you need right now? What kind of friend, coach, mentor do you want me to be? Do you want me to be the one that's like telling you what to do? Do you want me to just listen? What do you want? And I think that is helpful, because I often don't think we know what we want.
Right.
So forcing somebody to actually think that through is one of the most important steps, I think, in a coaching process.
Totally. That's such a great point, actually, because I've, sometimes struggled with this with my teenage children, where they sort of, will come to me with a problem, and my immediate instinct is like, I see a problem, provide a solution.
Right.
And asking them the question of, do you want a solution? Do you want me to just listen? What is it that you want and need at this time?
Right.
Yeah. So key. Creativity and innovation.
Yes.
These are perhaps the most often repeated words in organizations among leadership teams. Just a few weeks ago, actually, we were in conversation here with Amy Edmondson, who's focused some of her research on psychological safety.
Yes.
Tell us your thoughts on creating the right environment to encourage and boost creativity and innovation.
So it's interesting, because when you asked that, the first thing I thought was, is it creating the right environment in general? And then this creativity and innovation comes. And so the first thing that came to mind was, can we have an environment where people are different on many dimensions? Whether it's their thinking styles, whether it's their demographics like race, ethnicity, gender, whether it's their backgrounds, their whatever area they're in an organization. So if we bring diversity to the table, I think that there's tons of research showing that can lead to greater, more innovative solutions, because people with different ideas are then bringing them to the table.
Yeah.
But that doesn't lead to creativity on its own, because when people are different, that can lead to conflict.
Yeah.
Because everyone has different opinions and all that. So it's on the leader to create the environment that then allows for the creativity to come out and the conflict to be diminished. Yeah. And that means creating an environment where people feel like their voice matters.
Yep.
Where they can speak freely, where they are listened to, where they are not interrupted, where they're building off each other, where there's enough space and time. Because these days, I'm worried we're so rushed in our meetings. We're like, okay, we're going to have 90 minutes and then this is what we're going to do and then you're done. Yeah. No, can we create the space and the time to allow those ideas to flow? And so I feel like that in those ingredients of diversity, environment where voice and opinions are welcome, and time and space can lead to more creativity and innovation.
So we see this in our work where we coach professionals at companies with frequency, that they really struggle with creating the right environment, as you're saying, right? I think they know and understand the principles that you just outlined, and yet when they try to implement them, it's one of the most common things we see is there's sort of this like aversion to confrontation in a way. And I don't mean confrontation like people are yelling at each other, but just simple disagreement, right, in a professional setting that's expressed appropriately.
Right.
And they sort of draw back when they see that and feel, oh, it's bad, or I'm threatened by it, or somebody's threatened by it. And without an honest environment, I mean, maybe Bridgewater lies at one extreme of that honesty, but without that honest environment where people can say some of the negative things, again, appropriately, but can actually express those thoughts, it's really hard to create an open atmosphere, right? Where the freedom to express perhaps an unformed but creative or new idea can sort of happen.
Yeah.
Why is that struggle so acute? Has it always been so acute?
I think it probably has been, because I think that environment requires vulnerability.
Yes.
Requires people
on the leader's part.
On the leader's part.
Yeah.
To show that even they can make mistakes or have an idea that's not great, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really hard for people to be vulnerable. There's something, weakness that's associated with that. And so leaders tend to shy away from it, which means that people who they lead will shy away from it.
Right.
But I have found that the best leaders model that it's okay to make mistakes. Yeah. It's okay to have setbacks, because that's what makes us human. And everyone wants to see and understand and believe that they're working with people who are human like them, like the same emotions they have, others have. So I think that if you add a dose of vulnerability and don't view it as weakness, but actually as strength, then that is a piece of what can create even more innovative solutions.
So I'm curious for your thoughts on this. So I, worked at large and small companies, large, mid-sized, and small companies. One of them was Palantir, like a Silicon Valley. It was mid-sized by the time I got there, no longer a startup. And we would have, endless numbers of senior management teams or even middle management teams from large companies come through and visit us at Palantir, among other tech companies in the Valley, on sort of these innovation tours, like trying to understand why Palantir and other companies in the Valley are innovative and what's the environment like and so on. And they would index, in a sense, on the wrong thing, right? Because they'd be like, oh, like foosball tables and scooters and whatever. And it wasn't about that. It was more about leadership and the sort of modality of the dialogue that would go on amongst teams. What is it that big companies and leaders at big companies, why is that struggle so much more acute in those larger organizations, do you think, than it is in smaller ones or technology ones, or however is best to think about it? So to me,
so much trust is built in smaller interactions, in group, in one-on-one.
Yep.
And in a larger organization, leaders are busy, have more direct reports, have more things going on. So some of those one-on-ones just don't happen as much.
Yeah.
And so it's harder to develop that closeness or relationship that can be the foundation for so many of the behaviors that we want to see.
Right.
I mean, you just don't have the time to pour into people in a way that would make them feel like aligned and alive and able to bring their full selves.
So it's almost like a loss of fidelity in a way.
In some ways. And so how do you, in spite of the largesse of an organization, create those micro moments?
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen. More of those need to happen for people to feel psychologically safe in bringing themselves, bringing their ideas to the table. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. But the other thing is then if a leader, if you have enough of the right people reporting to you, then you can have that culture flow down into more of the one-on-ones of the direct reports and then of their direct reports. So, but it needs to start at the top first to then flow down.
Yeah. Is there, one of the things we like to use in our coaching engagements with, anybody, individual or corporate employee, is some of the most robust and commonly used assessment tools around either personality or professional skills, right? And do you feel like even sometimes, even when leaders are the right type of personality and are demonstrating vulnerability, as you said, and creating the right culture in their teams, there can be a breakdown somewhere further down the chain where, like the next set of managers is not doing that.
Yeah.
And is there almost a change in our corporate culture that we need to help diagnose some of these, almost like a lack of adequate leadership qualities among some of those professionals, and then actually address it however a company chooses to address it?
Yeah. I don't think enough leaders understand the basics of leadership. Leadership 101. Some of them have gone through the ranks, so they've never had outside training, Some have gone to business schools and others, which presumably I hope will have taught some of those skills, but then you need to be reminded of those skills over time.
Yeah.
And so I just think there's a fundamental breakdown in how we train in our organizations these leadership skills. Because some have never had them, some have also had awful managers themselves, so they don't even have a model of what a good leader looks like.
Right.
So if we're operating with so many of these different levels, then you need to level set through training that really creates some core fundamental traits or behaviors that everyone aspiring to be a leader should have.
Yep.
And I take that back, not even everyone aspiring to a leader. Everyone should have and exhibit to be able to be an effective leader at the organization. Totally. So that's where we're failing. We're not reminding people regularly of what they need to do to be effective.
And how do you think organizations should do that? Is it training, coaching, an open discussion about exactly these skills and qualities that needs to happen with greater frequency?
Yes. I also think that it needs to be customized training too. Because sometimes we think we can do this off-the-shelf stuff or whatever. No, what is unique about our organization, and how can we create something and tailor it towards the things that are unique about our organization? It kind of reminds me of like implicit bias training. Everyone learned, okay, we have issues with diversity. We need to be less biased. So let's do bias training. Well, what kind of bias training is it bias training that's right for your organization? Are there other elements of DEI that need to be fixed first before you delve deeper into that?
Right.
So I think we need to be better in our organizations at diagnosing what is needed and then customizing in a unique way. And the funny thing is, that sounds obvious.
Yes, it does.
But it's not done as much as it should be. And you mentioned, feedback systems, like performance evaluations and these processes are still not done well in most organizations.
Yeah.
So we need to align that leadership development training with what people are receiving in performance management systems, and then hold people accountable for that.
Right.
All of those systems are broken down in most of our organizations. So that's one of the big challenges, fixing these broken systems.
Totally. So I'm glad you brought up bias, because this has obviously been a focus of yours, and I think there's an increasing awareness of it in our society, and kind of dialogue and discussion of institutional biases, whether it's in the police or in a hospital or wherever. Tell us a little bit about that work and what some of your insights are from it.
So, a lot of this work is about trying to help organizations be more inclusive.
Yeah.
And at the individual level, I think it starts with the self. I think it starts at the individual.
Yeah.
And the first thing is recognizing that we are all biased.
Yes.
We are all in a society where there are myriad biases that we soak in what we read, in what we watch, in what we experience on the street. And so I think the biggest thing people need to do is pay attention and notice their own biases. That's the first step. And then once you recognize that, what some of these are, then being able to say, okay, now let me not behave in a discriminatory way.
Right.
And then taking it to the next level and saying, okay, well, what are some systems and processes that we have in place that could end up allowing bias to
Creep in.
And so that, but starting with the self,
Single most important
thing.
Yeah.
And I study this stuff and I'm biased all the time.
Right.
And I have to say to myself, I'm not a bad person for it. I'm human, but I would be a bad person if I didn't recognize it first,
right,
and then do something about it.
Right. So how do you think, like everyday individuals, how do everyday individuals develop a greater awareness of their own biases, do you think? Or how can we encourage that?
Yeah. So much of it is about every interaction you have. We have tons of interactions on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Who do I say hi to and who don't I? Who do I ignore and why? Whose name do I know in my organization? This is my big one for me. I try very hard to know the names of every single custodian or whatever that works on my floor.
Right.
Because because they deserve to have their name known.
I mean, it's the most basic recognition.
It's the most
absolutely
basic recognition.
Yeah.
But if you ask most people, they would not know. And I see their eyes light up when I say, "Hey, Lawrence, how are you? Hey, Balthazar." And I write it down. I don't have a great memory, so I write it down in my top drawer so that if someone comes in and is like cleaning the garbage or something, I can remember their name.
Right.
So can we just start there? We're biased in whose information we choose to care about.
Yeah, it's the most simple starting point.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. So Modupe, last question, and this one focuses on another often repeated word in our cultural moment, stress.
Yes.
Some of your research is focused on how organizational environments engender stress and how it influences both individual and organizational performance. You ended up implementing some of your research real time to work with Chris Hemsworth on the Netflix show Limitless.
National Geographic.
National Geographic.
Yes. So just
Sorry,
say that again.
I stand corrected. Yes. You ended up implementing some of your research real time to work with Chris Hemsworth in the National Geographic show Limitless. Are we more stressed than we've ever been before, or are we just talking about it more, or what are the drivers, do you think?
I think some of our stress, there are more things that we have on our plates these days than before that then lead to us being more stressed. Whether it's the fact that you are always on and you can always check your email, that people can ask you for anything from anywhere who you've never even met.
Right.
Then, yes, from an economy standpoint, there have been ups and downs, but the wealth gap is huge, which means that they're more stressors for some people than others. Yeah. Things are generally super expensive now. So we just have more, and when you have more, there's more of an opportunity to be stressed out by more things.
Right.
So it's not that it wasn't something that existed before, it's just the sheer volume of opportunities we have to be stressed is more these days.
Absolutely fair. But the first part of what you said, that there's just things coming at us all the time with constancy, is that a self-regulation issue? Like, yes, we all have phones, but we can also make active decisions not to look at our phones. Or how do you think about that?
I think that there are these societal norms, regardless of whether your personality can kind of overcome it,
right,
or self-regulation abilities, that kind of say you should always be on and available.
Fair. Yeah.
And so unless we buck that norm and say it's okay to not respond, or we change what timely is versus not,
Right.
or we respect people's boundaries, if we do that, then it'll allow for more people to engage in self-regulatory practices that are more helpful. But yeah, I'm sorry. Most of us, when we email somebody, we want them to respond pretty quickly.
Right. Fair. Absolutely fair.
Which is unfortunate because
Yeah.
that means that no one is breathing. People aren't breathing. They're constantly on. And so learning how to turn off.
Yeah.
But not only that, though, because that is painting a picture of the stress as a bad thing. I think it's ultimately about knowing the type of stress that you need that can help you rise to the occasion, and knowing the type of stress that can make you kind of buckle and not perform at your best.
Yeah.
And again, to the point of knowing yourself, once we get better at understanding what situations lead us to be less effective, where stress is debilitating versus the situations where stress is enhancing, if we can self-diagnose, then that will help us in adjusting to our ever-present stress.
That makes a ton of sense. You know, with so many things, you'll hear the prior generation say about the next generation, oh, they're so much smarter, oh, they're so much more technologically adept,
Yeah.
oh, they do so many more things. Do you think self-awareness is also increasing and evolving in a positive way for future generations or with each successive generation?
I think it is with each successive generation. I'm so happy about that because I think that prior generations, it was kind of like you just do and you survive and you make it happen. You don't need to find joy in your job. You don't have to find joy in your life. You just survive.
Get it done.
Get it done. And, I would like to say that my generation is kind of like, wait a minute, but all of you in that prior generation aren't that happy. So what do we need to do in our generation to be happier? And that has come with look inward. And now look inward and take advantage of resources, therapy, coaching, whatever, that can help you look inward.
Yep.
And now that's a norm, or more of a norm for the younger generations who have the capacity to take advantage of those resources.
Absolutely.
So it is getting better and better in some ways, but what we need to also do is level the playing field so that everybody has access.
So it's actually accessible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we all need to better understand all of the mess and beauty that's in here in these minds.
100%. That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. It was a treat. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe wherever you listen and leave us a review. Find your ideal coach at www.theideamix.com. Special thanks to our producer, Martin Maluski, and singer-songwriter Doug Allen.